All right, everybody, welcome to today's edition of the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo, Wrice, and my correspondent,
SimoneCherie Price.
Okay, you about to make me nervous. How about, oh God, what really just happened? All right, so today we are talking about estate planning. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to your family? Why should that be important to you? We are going to talk about all those things today. Now, as y'all know, if I want to talk about something, I go get the best of the best. So for me, who better to discuss this than to get somebody who's actually an attorney in estate planning. So we are honored to have today the amazing attorney, Alex Gaines. How are we doing today, ma'am?
Hi, Ricardo. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. Now, you know I have to say it, so I'm going to have to say it. So for those of you that know our friends of the show, Dr. Dana Rickman and Dr. Robert Gaines, this is Dr. Robert Gaines' wife. So that's an equal honor to have her here. Power couple. We always talk about power couples. Power couples. It's amazing.
Thank you.
All right. So, Attorney Gaines, tell us about your practice, how long you've been doing it, a little about yourself.
Okay. Well, first, I love to share that I am one of the few native Atlantans here in Atlanta. Born and raised here, and I have been practicing law. I know we're rare, so I've been practicing law.
We really are.
Yeah. So get a good look. Take a screenshot. Really. But I've been practicing here in Georgia for 10 years. I just celebrated my 10th anniversary from graduating from law school. I went to the University of Georgia, and I have had my own practice, Alex Gaines Law, here in Atlanta for the last 5 years. I started the practice. I'm a fourth generation entrepreneur, so that goes deep in my family tradition of starting my own business, and I had a lifelong dream of becoming a lawyer. And so everything just kind of came together right after my son was born. My first son was born. I have three little ones, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 6-month-old. And after my first, so
yeah, wow, I meant it.
I'm never bored. I can tell you that I'm never bored. But I started my own practice after my first son was born. I had experience in bankruptcy, consumer bankruptcy law, wills and estates, and also real estate law at that point. And I decided when I started my own firm for purposes of wanting to have flexibility with my child, but also realizing that there was an underserved market with estate planning. The traditional wills client is, in the golden age, the golden years, 60s, 70s, 80s, and are retiring, or maybe they're sick. And I realized that people like myself who have young kids, or people who are professionals and maybe are single and they don't have a spouse to automatically care for them if they're sick, or take care of the finances if they're unable to, that they are the main client who needs to have this information. And so that's what my focus is primarily with my firm, is focusing on informing young professionals, or just professionals and young families who have kids and need guardianship nominations in place in case something happens to them, to protect their children, about the importance of having a plan in place. Just like you mentioned, we have life insurance, we have car insurance, we have homeowners insurance even, just in case something happens. And that is what estate planning is for. It's not just about, I want to control what happens when I die. It's about how can I care for those that I love, and take care of everything that I'm already managing myself if I'm unable to.
All right. Before we get into it, because there's a lot we probably have to unpack today with this, because I really want to take us from step one all the way to the end, till you take that dirt out. So I know there's a lot that we need to unpack. So before we do that, there's too much going on in the world for us not to have some conversation. So Simone, what's on the rundown?
Yeah, good and bad, and a lot of bad, unfortunately. But this week has been a really crazy week of
reckoning for the entire country, starting from a widely circulated video that came out on Tuesday, shooting Floyd. So I think we should talk a little bit about that, a little bit about what's going on in Minnesota right now and the protests that are basically happening around the world, including in Atlanta. And then because we're still in the middle of reopening, we'll talk about COVID a little bit. We'll talk about what's safe, what's not safe, what the numbers look like, and what you probably should or shouldn't be doing, even if weather is permitting where you are. Weather is not permitting where I am right now, but there are parks that have recently done some crackdowns and folks that have started to get arrested for breaking the social distancing laws that I think a lot of folks thought were kind of null and void, or at least optional at this point because we've reopened. So I think there's probably some clarification we can do around what reopening means basically, and how to basically stay safe and also stay out of custody, considering that there are definitely still laws and rules around how we can behave at this point. So do you want to just start with George Floyd? Do you want to start in any particular order? Should we go over COVID and what's going on?
Let's start with COVID in Georgia first. Like, where do we stand with these laws? You said people were actually getting excited for stuff.
Yeah.
Let's start there.
Yeah, so very recently that started to happen. In Smyrna, there's basically a group that violated the park rules for social distancing guidelines. So Riverline Park, it's a pretty nice, pretty decent sized park in Smyrna. There was large scale activity, I guess it was continual, so they've now closed that park. It's over on Oakdale Road, and the same thing has happened with a few parks in Atlanta, including Piedmont a little bit earlier on in this process. Another Metro Atlanta city, South Fulton, has closed a park as well because people keep violating social distancing. I guess there was a football or softball training going on. So basically, even though Governor Kemp has reopened the state, his executive order states that we cannot gather in groups of more of 10 people. And we still are supposed to be following social distancing guidelines. So as businesses are reopening and people are starting to go back, I think you'll notice in some places there's a line and there's a limit as to how many folks can be in there at a time. LA Fitnesses and other big gym chains are kind of monitoring who's there. Some of them are having you check in advance so they can keep track of how many people are there. There's conflated reports about whether or not this is helping. Some folks agree that Georgia's cases are going down and that Southern cases are going down, and in Texas as well. Others are saying that, well, no, it's just the testing that's going down, and quite frankly, it's too early to tell whether or not this is an effective thing to do. But it looks like businesses and government are still trying to play it safe because Marietta announced this morning that they've canceled their Independence Day festivities. That's over a month away. So to kind of make those sort of declarations does kind of insinuate that, there's still some level of precaution around there. As of today, there have been 1,972 deaths in Georgia, 532,000 tests. So that's about 5% of the state population. About 45,000 confirmed cases and 7,800 hospitalizations. If you go to the Department of Public Health, dph.georgia.gov, you'll see their daily status report about all the different cases. You'll see those numbers as they come up. The expectation was that we would be at 2,000 deaths by June, and we are at 1,972, and it is May 29th. So that is, even though the curve is flattening according to some of this research, in terms of the impact, like that death toll, that's still right on target with what public health officials were worried about. So it's kind of hard to say. I think at this point, I'm in that camp. I don't know if it's easy to say whether or not we should be open, but if you don't want to be arrested or cited, there's up to $1,000 fine and a misdemeanor, especially in cities like Atlanta or in cities, really, I think lots of different places in the county of Gwinnett. If you are found to be violating social distancing guidelines or any of those ordinances, you can definitely face legal challenges. So don't put yourself in that situation. I don't know if that's a situation where you can help Attorney Gaines, but I think we want to discourage that anyway, even if it's something that you can jump in.
Don't do criminal.
We don't want people in that situation, so just got to be mindful and be careful.
I think we're having issues because people are because I know myself, I think we're at a place now where people are kind of confused, and they're kind of over it. Because it's like one day, and remember how this started. You have Kemp saying one thing, you have Trump saying something else, you got Mayor Bottom saying something else. So it's just kind of like at this point, nobody's still not on one page. And, people have been in the house now for 2 months. Now you kind of open the city. And when you open the city, you kind of gave these guidelines that people really didn't follow, because a lot of these businesses that are open are not following these guidelines that they're supposed to follow to open back up. Nobody's really checking it. So it's kind of like, at this point, I'll just take my chances because I'm going to die or I'm going to kill my kids if I stay in this house another month. So, at this point, I'm just going to take my chances. Whatever happens, happens. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing. People are just kind of over it. Nobody's controlling the narrative. And the ones that are very informed to give us the information, you silence them. So it's kind of, at this point, it's okay, I don't know what's going to happen, but the death toll is not 1 million. So I'm willing to take my chances. I understand that's kind of where we're sitting at right now. But Attorney Gaines, what are your thoughts? What do you think?
I'm actually glad that you all brought this up, because I have had those same thoughts the last few days. Like, where are we? Where do we stand? Because we have, Mayor Bottoms, who's still saying, like, everybody stay at home. We technically are allowed to go out, but we have to social distance. And then when you do go out, you see some people wearing masks and some people not. There are family, Memorial Day weekend, I'm walking my neighborhood and I'm seeing cars, down the road. And I'm like, well, they're not social distancing. So it's weird in between. I don't even know what to call it. It's unprecedented, where we're just all over the place. And you're right, Ricardo, I think most people are saying, you know what, for my own sanity, I'm going to get out. I'm going to do something, try and play it safe. I'll wash my hands when I get home, but these kids have got to get out of the house. So I can totally relate to what you're saying. And it seems that what's unfortunate is, we don't want the death toll to go up. We don't want the numbers to go up. And a lot of this has been politicized, where we're kind of like, well, see, if the numbers go up, we shouldn't have opened. But really, no one wins if the numbers go up. We want them to come down. We also want for businesses to be able to function and not go out of business. And we want to not just write 2020 off and stay at home for the rest of the year. So there's so many things that are in play and that are at stake. And I really, really would hope that we would get some leadership on the same page, so that we can unite and we can all try and figure out a path forward for our new normal, because we're not going back.
I hate that word "new normal" though. Like this, I went into the grocery store, and I felt like I was in a third world country.
Unemployment numbers.
Yeah, I'm just like, I feel like I'm in a third world country going in the grocery store, because everybody's wearing masks. And I'm just like, is this really going to be what it looks like? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and which nobody, mind you, nobody was paying attention to. I'm in, because they have the little tape on the floor at grocery stores.
Yes.
So I'm on my tape. This old lady just barges into my space. I'm like, ma'am, you do realize that exactly, like there's tape on the floor for a reason. Like, you shouldn't be breathing on my neck at this point. But I think my biggest question is, we keep saying that the numbers not going up, or the numbers are going down, but we still haven't raised the number of people we're testing. So how can we defensively make these statements when we're not testing more people? It's not mandatory. And honestly, in my personal opinion, it's like, if I get tested and I test positive, there's no cure. So, what really comes from it? I mean, it may help the numbers, so we can be honest about numbers, but it doesn't make sense. We're not testing more people. So how can we say these statistics are actually right? Because we're not testing more people. So I don't get it. I'm sitting in the middle. I'm kind of like everybody else. I'm over it. So I don't know how that's going to play out, but there it is.
I was reading that they're encouraging every citizen to go out and get tested, and so I've thought about, well, maybe me and my family, we should make an appointment. We should get in the car and go get tested. We've been in the house for 2 months, so I doubt that we would test positive, although you can be asymptomatic and test positive. But perhaps it is on us to incite some leadership by us getting out there and us getting ourselves tested, and saying, okay, well, we feel a certain community, we've all tested negative, maybe we can do some things together. But yeah, you're right. We do need to have more testing done. 500,000.
That's a good idea.
I'm just throwing ideas out there at this point, because you can't compel people to get
it's not
tested,
a problem.
Yeah, it's a mess. All right, so let's move into
we talked about that
elephant
before.
room.
Also, that possibility.
Moments in using her phone. Simone, you're going in and out, right?
So, have you? First of all, oh no. Okay, tell me. Can you hear me at this point? Is this Is this okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to talk slow enough that if it skips, it'll make a little bit of sense. In a way, we all know what's going on, and I'm sure we've seen the video or have at least are aware of it. I'm not much for those sorts of videos, but on Tuesday, the murder of George Floyd, that video started circulating. We know that, so the origin of the story was that it was a routine police call, run-of-the-mill sort of situation, but it resulted in the death of George Floyd. This was the Minneapolis Police Department. It's kind of begun a series of riots from Washington, D.C. to New York City to the West Coast. Unfortunately, that were supposed to be protests, and that have become, huge situations where buildings have burned, individual homes, businesses, Target in particular, who took to Twitter this morning to vent about how frustrated that they were. And then, so initially, when the video circulated, our president said on Twitter that he was going to expedite an investigation. He was going to have the DOJ look into it, that he was really disgusted by what he saw. Now, after these protests have gone the way that they've gone, he's referred to the protesters as thugs and is really dismayed about what's going on. There's always a big backlash against, protests or when as riots happen. And then there becomes this big divide about, well, the source of the frustration is really, the murder of this individual. It's not necessarily the response to that. And so why be more mad at the response than the initial problem, than the initial cause? So, but the thing is, especially because I think as a nation, we are just in the middle of kind of, I think, nationally coming together, at least, on the shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery right here in Georgia and Brunswick. And very shortly after learning about Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky, being shot by police. And then there's just kind of been this series of very senseless, very callous, very calculated, brutal murders of Black people, unarmed Black people, who I think is just caused this sort of national and international outcry. Even in like London, they were showing footage of protests that was going on. This isn't even their home. It just kind of shows the impact of this and where it's being felt around the world. And so, in this case, and the reason why I'm a little, there's some small progress being made because these officers were immediately fired in a sense. Now, have there been charges brought? Is there justice all around? Not necessarily. This was an officer who had a disciplinary report before. But previously we would get language after these sorts of things like, well, we're going to do a thorough investigation and we're going to really take this seriously and we're going to be open with the public. And I feel like now they're starting to get that more swift action is required. The Sheriff's Association of the state and of multiple states have come out and said that this is disgusting. And if you have a badge and you think this is okay, turn in this badge. I appreciate people calling out their own. I appreciate law enforcement standing up for what's right and what's wrong, and us kind of deciding that, some issues, we don't need to be tribal about some issues. There just needs to be like a right or wrong and not a left or a right or whatever. But that said, there's been a lot of damage done, and I wanted to kind of open up this conversation because people have very different opinions about how things should be dealt with. Obviously, I'm a lobbyist, so I know that there are laws that we could pass that would make this country better. They would never, ever, I don't think we'll ever be able to prevent bad people from doing bad things, but there are certainly things we can do that make it a lot harder for them to get away with those things. But at the same time, people have a right to protest and they have a right to gather. So I thought we could just kind of talk about what that sentiment has been. And before I open it up, I'll just say, my dad had like a small situation earlier this week where his heart kind of like stopped for a moment, and he needs to get it kind of screened or whatever. He doesn't have those health problems, but I learned from him, I'm really stressed about this, and it just kind of opened my mind a little bit further to think, if you're older and you've seen this all before, like there could be so much triggering about, watching the sort of things happen that you used to see happen. And going back to feeling just incredibly unsafe and hunted on a regular basis. Like for those of us, who are older, for our parents and for, grandparents if we've got them left. This is not new to them, but I'm sure it's either not been on the very front of their mind, or it's something they hoped they wouldn't be going through again.
And Simone, you know how I get. I think Will Smith said something that I was kind of like, he's right. I think he said that racism isn't new, it's just being filmed, or it's not getting worse, it's just being filmed. Something to that magnitude. I think we forget. I think there's a lack of correlation between what's written and what's enforced. So us dealing with what's enforced, and I'm talking about as it pertains to law. So us really, getting on people about what's being enforced versus what's actually being written, I think there's a lack of correlation between that. The fact that our communities, and I'm talking about the younger generation, and it's not all of us, but it's too many of us. I don't think we really understand the power of, our local government. The people, the senators and stuff that are making decisions on our behalf. The fact that they are not advocating for, like what you do, Simone, with criminal reform or bills of that magnitude, they're not advocating for those types of things. What they're doing is they're kind of sitting back and going, okay, I know they're expecting me to make a statement. I'll make this statement because it's what I'm supposed to do. But once this statement is over with, they're going to stop protesting. They're going to go back into their holes. We're going to continue life as normal, versus us actually standing on something, taking this energy and this momentum that we get every time we see these things and actually funneling it into making them change criminal reform. I told my friend last night, that what we need to do is do like that episode of A Different World where they stormed the provost of somebody's office, and they actually did a sit-in in his office until he actually changed some rule that he made on campus. If we're going to protest, I think that's where we need to actually start doing it. Showing up to these senators' offices or phone calling, swamping their offices with phone calls, and not stopping until and have some people on the front line who are in law to say, this is the bill we saw you did not vote on. This bill would have changed something in this particular community. Until you revisit this bill or re-put it back on the floor, we're going to continuously swamp your office with calls. That way, when they go back to their offices after they've made their little statement, they're having to make some form of change because they realize we're serious and we understand that you're the one that has a hand in making these laws better or worse. That's my personal opinion on it, because outside of that, we have all these hashtags and we have new martyrs every other day. And I hate that somebody's life is being taken, but we have this momentum going for about 4 or 5 days, 2 weeks max, and then we go back to our normal lives until the next martyr shows up. It can't be that. It has to be a two-field playing game with people on the field, doing the protests and stuff, and people in these offices that are saying, okay, we have the momentum. This is where we need to divert this momentum. This is the bill that we need to be passed, or this is the legislation that needs to be changed, and we're working twofold. Because if not, we're just having more hashtags. Mm-hmm. But that's my personal opinion. Attorney Gaines, what you think? What you think?
I agree with you, Ricardo. And being an attorney and understanding the way life really works for the majority of people is you need to understand how the game is played. And for so many of us, we're playing a game on social media and we're vocal, but does that voice translate to action? And as you said, getting in with the legislature, lobbying, doing sit-ins, doing effective types of protesting will affect change. And so I find it to be, the whole situation is just heartbreaking that this man lost his life, and a community is hurting. People are running on emotions and are angry, rightfully so. But in the end, I feel like that will the violence, the violence and the destruction. I was reading that one of the buildings that was destroyed was 200 units that were going to be affordable housing in the community. And so now that building is destroyed, and it set that community back. Mm-hmm. And it's taking away from the issue. But I don't excuse or condone violence and looting and breaking the law, but I understand the frustration that people have. I just agree with you that we have to come together and find a more effective way to get the change that is so needed.
I just have a question for the people. I think we're in Minnesota.
Just to close this out, what? Ricardo, you'll be happy to hear. What I was going to say, you'll be happy to hear that here, though, Chris Clark, who we had a great interview with, CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, he has endorsed the hate crimes bill that the House passed, and Republicans as well have hopped on that bandwagon. Chuck Estration, who's just a good guy in general, but he as well has led this charge too. So that it's hard to, legally speaking, we don't need qualified immunity. There are so many actual laws. Citizens arrest, like, what is that? This is not 1700s. This is not ancient England. We don't need citizens arrest. So some of those things we can definitely change, but there's something to be said about the fact that when people get pissed off enough, the people in the suits behind the doors do start to sign pieces of paper. And if it doesn't seem like they have to, if that pressure isn't there, there's other priorities. We want to get people back to work. There's a million priorities. So it's kind of hard to say whether or not, it's definitely not ideal, but unfortunately that sort of pressure does seem to work, at least indirectly, before it happens here. So if you do want to get active, if you do want to storm, if you do want to be a part of the protest, there is going to be a protest at the state capitol. There's going to be a march and a protest there today. Folks are going to start meeting at 3. There'll be signs, there'll be distributable water. This is in the city of Atlanta. The demonstration at 4:20 will be held at Centennial Olympic Park. That's where it'll kind of loop back. So, if you have time this afternoon, coming up in the next couple of hours, again, organizations are trying to remind people, have your ID, have an ID on you, don't destroy property, don't incite violence, obey the traffic laws, and use your cameras to record everything. That is something I've heard plenty of Democrats and Republicans say recently, and I'm glad they're saying it. So that's all.
I just, to the people, and I think we're talking Minnesota, I'm just trying to understand why we're attacking Target. I'm trying to get there. They're showing pictures of people running out of Target with lamps and mannequins, and I'm just trying to understand. I don't get it. Look, I know there are opportunists who wait for these moments to get that big screen TV they want, but come on, people, we cannot destroy this stuff in your community. Because once you destroy that Target, there's no guarantee the Target is going to build back in that same community. So let's be smart about this. Let's not be crazy, and let's not use the opportunity to decorate your house with the lamps you just felt like you couldn't afford from Target. Let's be smart about this. But I digress. All right, so let's get into the matter of today. We've had a nice little conversation, but let's get to the real conversation. So we're going to talk about estate planning. What is that? Why do I need it? All that good stuff. So we have the amazing attorney on the line with us today, Attorney Alex Gaines, who has her own practice. So let's start from ground zero. So